Jesus Freak here, and some time ago I had a copy of the Confraternity New Testament that was in poor shape and eventually fell apart. So I decided that making my own copy of it, since it was out of copyright, um, would be cheaper than trying to fix the book. Anyway, the Confraternity New Testament is the predecessor of the New American Bible and a revision of the Challoner version. Now, the Challoner version has some issues, despite the fact that Richard Challoner in 1750 took the Douay-Rheims Bible and fixed a lot of its issues in the light of the King James. So the Challoner version is basically the Catholic King James, so to speak, and reads very similar to the King James. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that although I believe, not every Catholic follows it, they're told they're not supposed to read a Protestant translation because they're corrupt. As we know that the Douay-Rheims especially, which the King James translators mocked the Douay-Rheims for some of their translation choices, as did one person who basically put the whole New Testament side by side with the Bishop's Bible and criticized it. Anyway, in 1941, they did a critical edition of the Latin New Testament and based the translation on this. And there were some issues. Basically, I think they've pretty much taken care of the more problematic parts of the Challoner New Testament. For example, and I just checked this to confirm, but the Challoner version still maintained the tendency in the Douay-Rheims of using the phrase do penance instead of repent. And it's been fixed. Most of the issues have been fixed. There's still annotations that can be very problematic. For example, the whole bit about what Jesus means by "on this rock I'll build my church" is very much incorrectly understood in Matthew 16. But the translation is actually pretty solid. So far as they actually corrected the issues in the Vulgate itself, to some extent. Revelation 22, for example, it has, in 22:19, it says Tree of Life instead of the normal reading Book of Life, as I believe is more correct to say Tree of Life based on the context. So, they've fixed that. There's no calling into question the end of the Gospel of Mark in any sense. Nor is there any calling into question the pericope adultery in John 8. They do bracket off the comma Johanneum, but they note that at the time they hadn't made a final determination on whether to consider it canon or not, since even earlier copies of the Vulgate did not have this text in it, as well as it being entirely absent from Greek until really late. It is still translated from the Vulgate. There are some translators' notes that point out differences between the Vulgate and the Greek. Some names are spelled differently on account of being Latin-based instead of Greek. The minor differences. It is in modern English. It's not early modern English. It still does use thee and now. And I guess, this is kind of transitional, but it uses thee and now for everyone, not just for deity. No exclusion of these verses. There's a lot of cases stuff is excluded from modern versions is still quite very much intact here. Like I said, I do find fault with the annotations. I believe the translation is, as far as I can determine, it's solid. Now, if I were going to try to pull someone out of Catholicism, I'd probably use this translation to do it. And then, once I've managed to get them out of that, I'd switch them to this translation. So, give a more proper translation. But I do think the Confraternity translation, New Testament, I think I'd probably still try to use some other Old Testament translation, would be adequate. Honestly, I think you could probably break someone out of Catholicism using just this. And, of course, I believe that's the point. As I'm a firm believer that the Roman Church is not the true church. They may have been in early days when there was just, the Greco-Roman Church, what we call now the Orthodox Church. But I think, both have kind of gone off the path, and to varying degrees. But yeah, if you can't use the Protestant translation to break someone, you can at least use that, the Confraternity version. And since, it's an honest translation, it'll work a lot better than trying to use the Jehovah's Witness Bible to break a Jehovah's Witness out. Anyway, Jesus freak out.